Hey everybody, super excited to chat today with Singlestore. Madhukar, how are you?
I'm great, Ivan, and thanks for inviting me on this. I'm really excited.
Well, I'm excited too to chat with you. I've learned so much about the future of Gen AI, and you guys are bringing together real time analytics with AI, a really fascinating topic. And we're going to dive right into that in an upcoming event as well. Maybe first introduce yourself and who is Singlestore?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Madhukar, and I'm the Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer at Singlestore. And I've been here since the beginning of this year. Prior to this, I've worked as a developer and then ran product teams, product management, and product marketing teams in companies like Oracle, Redis, Nutanix, and Zora. So, for those who don't know, Single Store is a database. It's been around for about 10 years, and it started off as by being called MemSQL because, along with Redis and Memcached, MemSQL was one of the only two other in-memory database. But over a period of time, what we did, we patented a technology that takes that data, and it's MySQL wire protocol compatible, but
Hmm.
it takes that data, row-based data, and it can also store it as columnar data, which is classic for analytics, which means you could do super fast analytics, like super fast as in milliseconds, and you can also do transactions as well. So Single Store is a multi-model database, distributed SQL, and it has compatibility with MySQL wire protocol, but also MongoDB APIs and supports multiple different data types, including vectors, which is now become really, really popular with LLMs and AI.
Yeah, I've been learning a lot from you about vector and semantic search, and that's your sweet spot. So it looks like the whole world has moved into that for enterprise applications around LLMs. And describe your core offerings. So, how do you handle the analytics and the transaction around these applications? What does your product suite look like?
Yeah, so think of it as it's a combination of OLTP and OLAP, right? So
Mhm.
what you can do is you can use single store for both transaction as well as analytical workloads. But primarily the sweet spot is, let's say you have analytics that you want to run in few milliseconds. So let's take an example of DoorDash, Uber, or Lyft. And there you have extremely fast data that's being generated. And so let's say you and I were standing at the same street and we both pulled out our phones and we tried to book a ride to the same destination,
Mm.
you would get a different price than us. And it's based on analytics, which is real time analytics. So what tends to happen is you take millions and millions of data points in a few split seconds, and based on a number of variables, you generate a promotion. So that use case then becomes extremely useful. Let's say if you want to do fraud detection, fraud prevention. You want to do real time investment management. So we have about 60% of all our customers are Fortune 500 companies. So you have very large investment firms. You have companies that does security like Palo Alto Networks. You have companies like Comcast, Siemens, Hulu, and so on. And they primarily had been using us for real-time analytics, but also for transactions. And in terms of Gen AI, when the LLMs became really, really popular a few months ago, what happens with Gen AI is that your large language model is not aware of your data, which could be petabytes of data sitting behind firewall or in your own
Mm.
virtual private cloud. So how do you make your LLM aware of that data? So one pattern that has emerged and it's become really popular now is called retrieval augmented generation, RAG for short, or you can also call it in context learning or real time learning. So basically, what you're doing at that time is when somebody asks a question, you interpret that or you intercept it, then you go back to your corpus of enterprise data, you curate it, and then you create context for the LLM and say, hey, you're a really smart prodigy child. Now here's a book about my data. Now answer the questions related to it. So when you do that, that's where semantic search comes in, and that's where vectors come in. And that's why you certainly see a lot of people talking about vectors and vectors only database. But the reality is, if you are building context, you are actually not just relying on vector, but a combination of vector plus lexical search or keyword match and matching all kinds of data, SQL as well as unstructured and so on. And that's kind of where the sweet spot is for LLM applications for single store.
Yeah, sweet spot indeed. And as such, you're bringing together really the industry to Singlestore now, a real-time AI conference. It's really a unique event, kind of one of a kind. October 17th in San Francisco. Tell us about this event and what your plans are, and what insights are we going to be able to take away from this event?
Yeah, I think the big thing is if you're a developer and you're really looking to build and deploy production grade LLM apps, then this is the event for you.
Mm.
So, for one day, and it's at a very good location at the Chase Center in San Francisco, you come and spend some time the whole day with us. And first and foremost, we are going to bring in a lot of folks from the industry, from hyperscalers, AWS, Google, and some of our customers who have been using us. But you also learn from open source community members like Jerry, who founded and runs Llama Index, Harrison Chase, who founded LangChain, and it's one of the most popular libraries now. And you would learn how to build an entire enterprise grade application and then deploy it to your hyperscaler of choice. So we have companies like IBM, which is a partner, Google, AWS, all coming in, and we will be going through this step by step. So at the end of the day, you would walk away with code, tutorials, as well as resources to how go do this in your own company. And the other thing I'm quite excited about is we are actually also going to be announcing some significant things that we have been working on from vector search perspective, as well as the changing landscape of databases for AI. So I'm particularly very interested and excited about talking about that during our keynote.
Yeah, that looks phenomenal. What are some of the applications that you're seeing your developer AI engineer customers building? There's just it seems like there's such a breadth of enabling applications out there being built around LLMs and more. Are there any ones that look particularly exciting to you?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing a couple of different, first of all, at a very high level trend. One is more and more LLM based apps are also becoming agentic. So it's not just about, okay, it's a chat interface and just give
Mm.
me an answer, but give me an answer, then I'm going to take that, give it to another LLM, and then do something else with it. And then finally, in that chain, I'm going to execute it. So that's where agentic applications come in. So end to end, it's a pipeline where you're giving an input and the end result is an action. So that's where we are seeing a lot of these. But the ones that I see a lot more, especially maybe because of the large customers that we work with, like investment banks or companies that are doing things like auditing of tax documents and very dense documents where it's a lot of human effort and it costs a lot of money. So without naming any customers, let's say there is a company that spends billions of dollars on just auditing documents for a bunch of different companies. Now imagine if you could take all of that, convert it into vectors, created the context,
Mm.
and then you used a combination of multiple different LLMs like an ensemble and started asking questions to it. And you could even detect things like, was there an anomaly here or was there a similar pattern here? And so used to take months and humans annotating and then reading it and then turning into OCR, you can now actually start doing this with LLMs. And that's one of the most common ones. The other ones are, of course, image matching for things like Amber Alert kind of
Mm.
use cases where you mix and match both kinds of data, the make of the car that you saw, the license plate along with the fuzzy image, and then doing something with it in split seconds. And then, of course, fraud detection and fraud prevention. Those three are some of the ones that I've seen more recently, but of course, there's a lot more.
Brilliant. So we've seen a trend start emerging for private LLMs on cloud platforms like AWS. Do you see this increasingly adopted by enterprise? How are you facilitating those models as
Yeah,
well?
yeah, absolutely. I think that is where most of the B2B companies are going
Hmm.
because the OpenAI and the Chat GPT is more for B2C. So
Hmm.
if you're using it for your own personal stuff, then that's fine. But typically, and now they have become much more clear about their privacy, principles or whatever. But if you are, let's say, a HIPAA compliant healthcare company,
Mm.
there are reasons why you want to keep that data within your private network, and then you want to run your own LLMs. So there are a couple of different options. You can either go to the open source version, which is right now Hugging Face is one of the
Mm.
biggest places where you can go get it. And in that, you see emerging a lot of these open source LLMs that are getting better and better. I think the Llama 2, which was open source by Meta, is a really good example. Gorilla, which came out of UC Berkeley just for APIs, that's a good one, and so
Mm.
on. So you can take an ensemble of that, you can fine tune those. And then, of course, there are other hyperscalers that offer their own set of both private as well as open source LLM. So, for example, Google has Vertex AI, and within Vertex AI, you get not only Google ones, but you also get the open source ones. You go to, let's say, IBM, and IBM Watson X has their own set of models. And then you go to AWS, Bedrock, and SageMaker. With Bedrock, you get Anthropic and a bunch of other LLMs as well. So depending on what your organization main policies are, you can mix and match and choose where you want to use your open source or the commercial ones, but in a totally air gapped and private way.
Brilliant. Well, that's an amazing approach. And tell us about scale. I mean, scale is a concern. You seem to help clients master scale. What's the secret there?
Yeah, I think we are in the early stages where we definitely where we see scale is when you want to run real-time analytics along with LLM based operations, right? So for example, again, we talked about it where you want to mix and match both SQL, PDF, and other data, and then do also semantic search on it. But you want it to do it in few milliseconds. So for those use cases, that's where we see Singlestore talking directly to your users, or it's the interface between your user app and before even it goes to LLM. So there, the latency is near zero, where you're doing all of this vectorization as well as retrieval and all that in a few milliseconds, and then handing it back over to the LLMs. Now, of course, as we know, LLMs are not responding in a few milliseconds yet. But the good news is that a lot of LLMs are getting miniaturized, and you can also run it outside of the internet. So I think a great example is if you look at the assistant on the Apple Watch without naming it, otherwise it might triggers your or mine. It can run on device even without an internet. So I think when that happens, when both your large language model, or at that point not a large language model as well as the data sits very close to the user, then it becomes real-time AI. And that's what one of our vision is, to be able to enable that through data.
That's fantastic. You've done a great job at collaborating with industry leaders. You've got these speakers from AWS and Google Cloud and IBM who've been known to have pretty sharp elbows in competing with each other. So, how did you manage to rope these folks in? And you're working with so many different industry players. That's quite a mission.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you look at customers, all the big companies, the
Mm.
hyperscalers, whether it's AWS, GCP, they're very customer friendly and they honor the choices of the customers, what they
Mm.
want. And the reality is that you have to live in this ecosystem where you everybody gets to play together. If you look at just my marketing organization, we use a bunch of different tools. So if somebody just came in and said, "No,
Mhm.
you only use mine,"
Mm.
then that's not going to work. And as you grow bigger and bigger in terms of revenue and size, that becomes a little bit more true. So from that perspective, I think this is a brand new ecosystem. And in this ecosystem, there's the infrastructure layer, there's the data layer, and then, of course, there's the application and the UI layer. And so at each layer, there are going to be companies, or there are companies that's going to maybe differentiate better than the others or might have better offerings. So it's ultimately up to the customers to choose which one works for them. And so to not have an ecosystem that doesn't work with each other is not uh, true anymore for any company, including databases. I mean, we work very closely with other databases too,
Mm.
whether it's analytics side or whether it's on the transaction side.
Yeah, it's really, really best of breed. And finally, here you picked an amazing location. Everyone's been counting San Francisco out, but what a great spot! And of course, the Bay Area is sort of reemerged as ground zero for AI development, which has been great to see. So really nice spot on the water.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those iconic places where so much history has been made. And what I'm personally looking forward to is that Jumbotron is brought down to the middle of the court, and then we cordon off the area, and all the developers get in there and they get to just bring in their laptops, hands on the keyboard, and just build some exciting stuff for the whole day.
That's awesome. And you price this to be pretty accessible to all comers. It's not like the usual $1,000 pass, $199, and I think you have a discount code which I think we'll share on social media. So yeah, really accessible. Well done. It's it's tough to pay the multi-$1,000 kind of tickets these days to events, which is kind of become the norm, sadly.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, my son is in college, and I'm a great fan for educating even the college students to learn more about this.
Mm.
So, using the coupon code that you have, or if people reach out to me, we can give coupon codes out, which will make this ticket like $10 or $25.
Oh, it's fantastic.
We have a few, and it pays for itself because when you come in, you will get a hoodie or a T-shirt and a bunch of other things, food, and you get to learn the entire, the whole thing about building an LLM from end to end.
That's fantastic. Yeah, there's so few resources now for education and learning. There's just such a new area that this is a fantastic opportunity. And thanks so much for sharing a bit of time. We'll be live tweeting, live posting the event, and look forward to maybe a debrief afterward on some of the lessons learned and share some of the content with the viewers.
Absolutely, and thanks again, Evan. Looking forward to chatting more, especially around how this plays out and in the exciting world of AI and where the world is headed with this.
Fantastic. And thanks everyone for watching. Reach out to Singlestore with any comments or questions. And until then, take care, everyone.
Take care.